Okay, so imagine you're in Calgary, it's a beautiful summer day, you turn on your tap, and nothing comes out. Or worse, you're told you can only flush your toilet if absolutely necessary. Now imagine finding out this nightmare scenario happened because a critical water pipe, a pipe so important it supplies water to over 1 million people, was allowed to deteriorate so badly it basically exploded. And now imagine the Premier of Alberta and the Leader of the Opposition, who just happens to be Calgary's former mayor for 11 years, are about to go to war over whose fault it is. Welcome back to Canadian Insights, where today we're diving into what might be the most explosive political water fight since Calgary's actual water pipe exploded. Danielle Smith is coming in hot, Naheed Nenshi is in her crosshairs, and someone's about to get absolutely soaked in blame. Grab your popcorn, folks, because this is about to get messy. So let's set the scene here. Calgary had a massive water crisis. We're not talking about a little leak or some rusty pipes in one neighborhood. We're talking about a catastrophic failure of a major water feeder main that crippled the city's water supply. People couldn't water their lawns, businesses were scrambling, the city was on emergency protocols, and everyone was asking the very reasonable question, how did we let this happen? This is Calgary, not some remote outpost with aging infrastructure nobody thought about. This is Alberta's biggest city, and somehow a critical piece of water infrastructure was allowed to deteriorate to the point of failure. Enter Danielle Smith, Premier of Alberta and someone who clearly woke up one morning and decided she was going to make this everyone's problem, specifically Naheed Nenshi's problem. Smith's government has now ordered Calgary City Hall to turn over all their paperwork dealing with what she's calling the Calgary water pipe farce. And when I say all their paperwork, I mean all of it. Council records, plans, reports, budgets, media reports, the political ins and outs, basically everything short of the mayor's grocery list. Although honestly, they'd probably take that too if they thought it was relevant. This isn't just a casual request for some information. This is the provincial government launching what can only be described as a forensic investigation into City Hall, and they're making it very clear they're looking for someone to blame. Actually, scratch that, they're not looking for someone, they know exactly who they're looking for. His name is Naheed Nenshi, he was mayor for 11 years, and is now conveniently the leader of the Alberta NDP, which means he's Smith's main political opponent. Now, before we go further, let's talk about the timeline here, because it matters. Nenshi was Calgary's mayor from 2010 to 2021. That's 11 years of being the guy in charge at City Hall when presumably decisions were being made, or not made, about infrastructure maintenance and upgrades. The water pipe that failed was old, like really old, and it's not like pipes suddenly deteriorate overnight. This was years, probably decades, of gradual wear and tear that someone, somewhere, should have been monitoring and planning to replace. Smith went on the record a couple of weeks ago, and according to reports, she was visibly upset when she singled out Nenshi for bearing much of the blame for the water crisis. Not some of the blame. Much of the blame. That's not subtle. That's not diplomatic. That's the Premier of Alberta pointing directly at the Leader of the Opposition and saying this is on you, buddy. It's the political equivalent of calling someone out in front of the entire class, except the class is the entire province of Alberta. And Smith's not alone in this fight. She's got backup in the form of Dan Williams, her Minister of Municipal Affairs, or as the script calls him, her city's boss, which honestly sounds way cooler than Municipal Affairs Minister. Williams is absolutely not holding back. He's out here saying that anyone who insists there was no negligence at the city is gaslighting Calgarians. Those are fighting words. He's talking about extraordinary negligence at the political level, and when you combine that with Smith's comments about Nenshi, it's pretty clear who they're talking about. Williams is basically issuing a challenge to anyone who has a problem with what the province is doing. He's already ready to rumble, which is the kind of energy you usually see in hockey games, not municipal infrastructure disputes. He's slamming people who would try and throw mud at the province, and pointing fingers at those who would try and deflect and change the channel, specifically those who have been in municipal politics at an elected or administrative level through this time. You know, like someone who was mayor for 11 years. Just hypothetically. Not naming names. Except they totally are naming names. So here's what's actually happening beneath all the political theater. The province is positioning this as a case of municipal negligence, arguing that City Hall, under various leaderships but especially under Nenshi, failed to properly maintain critical infrastructure. They are suggesting that warnings were ignored, that maintenance was deferred, that priorities were misplaced, and that the result was a completely predictable and avoidable crisis. And now they want the receipts, literally all the receipts, to prove it. From the province's perspective, this makes perfect sense politically. Smith's government can position itself as the responsible adults in the room, holding municipal politicians accountable for their failures. They can paint the NDP, and by extension Nenshi, as incompetent managers who can't be trusted with infrastructure, let alone the entire province. And they're doing all this while forcing Nenshi, who's trying to build credibility as a provincial leader, to defend his record as mayor during a crisis that affected over 1 million people. But here's where it gets interesting, because Nenshi's not some rookie politician who's going to roll over. The man was mayor of Calgary for 11 years, won 3 elections, became a national figure, and has more political savvy in his pinky finger than most politicians have in their entire bodies. He knows how this game is played, and is undoubtedly preparing his defense. That defense probably looks something like, infrastructure funding is complicated, provincial support matters, long-term planning requires resources, and maybe, just maybe, the province itself bears some responsibility for how municipalities are funded and what they can afford to maintain. Because here's the uncomfortable truth that's going to come out in all this paperwork diving. Municipal infrastructure maintenance in Canada is a perpetual crisis. Cities across the country are dealing with aging pipes, crumbling roads, and deteriorating systems because infrastructure is expensive, unglamorous, and politically unrewarding. Politicians at all levels tend to prefer cutting ribbons on new projects rather than explaining why they're spending millions to replace a pipe nobody can see. And municipal governments in particular are squeezed between limited revenue tools, downloading of responsibilities from provinces, and public demands for services. So when the province starts going through Calgary's paperwork with a fine-tooth comb, they're going to find exactly what they're looking for, which is evidence of deferred maintenance, ignored warnings, and budget priorities that placed other things above pipe replacement. But they're also going to find evidence of resource constraints, funding requests that went nowhere, and tough choices made in contexts that might actually look pretty reasonable given the circumstances. The question is, what's the endgame here? Is Smith genuinely interested in getting to the bottom of what went wrong so it doesn't happen again, or is this primarily about damaging Nenshi politically? Because those are two different missions, and the cynic in me suspects it's more the latter than the former. The timing is just too perfect. Nenshi is now the NDP leader, his Smith's main opposition, an election is on the horizon, and suddenly the province is launching an investigation into his time as mayor that just happens to focus on a crisis that made life miserable for Calgary residents. Williams is already framing this as a battle between the province trying to protect Calgarians and municipal politicians trying to deflect blame. He's talking about people trying to throw mud at the province, trying to change the channel, which suggests he's expecting Nenshi and others to fight back. And they probably will. This isn't going to be a one-sided investigation where the province releases damning documents and everyone nods along. This is going to be a political war with competing narratives, selective leaks, dueling press conferences, and enough spin to make your head hurt. And let's talk about what happens when all this paperwork gets reviewed. Someone in the provincial government is going to wade through years of documents looking for anything that makes Nenshi and City Hall look bad. Every questionable decision, every deferred maintenance plan, every budget choice that prioritized something other than pipe replacement is going to get highlighted. We're probably going to see carefully curated releases of information designed for maximum political damage. Internal documents show City Hall was warned about pipe deterioration as early as. You can already write the headlines. But here's the thing, and this is important, infrastructure failures are almost never one person's fault. They are systemic failures that involve decades of decisions, multiple administrations, provincial and federal funding arrangements, and structural issues in how we fund and maintain public infrastructure. You can point at Nenshi all you want, but he didn't personally decide not to fix the pipe. He was part of a system, a council, a city administration, and broader political and economic context that all contributed to the outcome. That nuance, however, is probably going to get lost in the political fight. Smith needs a villain for her narrative, and Nenshi is the perfect villain because he's politically convenient. He's the opposition leader, he was in charge for a long time, and the water crisis happened on Calgary's watch. Never mind that Smith's own government could have been providing more infrastructure funding to municipalities, or that conservative governments provincially and federally over the years have also made choices about how much to support municipal infrastructure. Those details tend to get glossed over when there's a good political fight to be had. Nenshi, for his part, is going to have to walk a careful line. He needs to defend his record as mayor without looking defensive. He needs to acknowledge the crisis was serious without accepting full blame. He needs to point out provincial responsibilities without looking like he's deflecting. It's a tough spot, and how he handles it is going to matter for his credibility as a provincial leader. If he comes across as making excuses or dodging responsibility, that's going to hurt him. But if he can frame this as a broader issue of infrastructure funding and governance, he might actually turn it into a platform for his own policy proposals. The Calgary water crisis and the political fallout from it is basically a perfect case study in how infrastructure failures become political weapons. An actual, serious problem that affected real people's lives is now primarily a vehicle for two political opponents to fight each other. And while they are fighting, the underlying issues, the actual systemic problems with how we fund and maintain infrastructure in Canadian cities, will probably remain unaddressed because they are complicated and boring and don't fit neatly into attack ads. So as this heats up over the coming weeks and months, as documents get released and accusations fly and press conferences happen, remember that beneath all the political theater is a real question about how we maintain the systems that keep our cities functioning. Calgary's water pipe didn't fail because of political spite or negligence in the villainous sense. It failed because maintaining infrastructure is hard, expensive, and requires long-term thinking that doesn't always align with political cycles. But good luck getting either side to focus on that when there's an election to win. What's your take? Is Smith right to go after Nenshi's record, or is this political opportunism? Did City Hall under Nenshi drop the ball, or are they scapegoats for broader systemic issues? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because Calgary residents especially probably have some opinions on this one. And if you made it through this entire deep dive into infrastructure politics and political warfare, you're clearly a Canadian Insight superfan, so do me a favor and subscribe. We're pumping out videos all day every day, keeping you in the loop on every political fight, scandal, and crisis this country produces. Hit that bell, stay informed, and remember, in Canadian politics, even water pipes become weapons. See you in the next one.